Just be patient, the universe will bring you the one, you just know it. Is the sort of narrative that has been played out over centuries through fairy tales, romantic movies, and the advice of older people. And love is almost presented as this sort of predetermined event that's just supposed to happen. Yet when we look at the world around us, things get a little bit more complex than that. And it truly does raise the question of what we call love is just convenience and deep-rooted familiarity. Now, I'm not going to sit here and act like I'm an expert on love. This video is more so an exploration surrounding the whole topic, because what a lot of us call love is usually entwined with our personal fears, societal expectations, and unspoken compromises. And what ends up happening is that we end up narrating our own lives, just so that it gives us some sort of meaning. Because there are some who've embraced the idea of being single, whilst there's others who have labelled themselves as hopeless romantics. And the rest are somewhere in between, navigating dating apps, getting ghosted, and getting tied into situationships. Essentially, things which blur the line between genuine connections and convenience. And even those who are in stable relationships may have doubts of, am I with this person because I truly love them? Or is it because I just don't want to be alone? Or is it the fact that I want to be perceived a certain way by others? And this is, in my opinion, the more concerning part of human nature, as most people would not admit these things to you, nor to themselves, if they're even aware of it. Now, to get a better understanding about love, I think it's good that we take a step back in time. As for the majority of human history, marriages and long-term partnerships were rarely based on romantic attraction, but rather more so for survival and economic stability. So this idea of love, as we understand it today, was often incidental, a byproduct rather than something which was a prerequisite. And even if we look at it from a cultural perspective, this rise in the idea of romantic love coincided with the shifts in individual autonomy in the 17th and 18th century. And philosophers such as Rousseau and other romantic poets at the time argued that true happiness was inseparable from the authentic emotional experience that we call love. And this introduced the idea that marriage could actually be a choice that we understand conventionally as love, rather than something which was an obligation for survival, for instance. Yet the culture we live in today complicates this vision, where the mainstream encourages individuals to pursue intimacy without risk, and pleasure without commitment, and to assume that love is intuitive, like you just know when you encounter it. Which is a little bit paradoxical, since love is generally treated as a natural feeling, even though if we look back in history, our understanding and practice of love has always been shaped by historical and cultural factors. And this brings us to the concept of the one, a soulmate who is out there, who is waiting to connect with us and complete that part of us. But is that a narrative that we like to play in our minds? A compelling story just so it makes our lives a bit more meaningful. You could argue that love isn't something that we passively stumble upon once in our lives and fall into, but rather something that we consciously choose and actively work on a daily basis. And this reveals a part of our understanding about love, as it can go from romantic idealism to pragmatic reality, since love is, in practice, rarely unconditional in its early stages. Since things like physical attraction, charm, compatibility and chemistry, social status, validation, our unspoken expectation of what we would like our partner to be like, all plays a part in this initial conditional aspect of love. And some may even dismiss these claims as being superficial or reducing love to something which it's not. But I would like to disagree. If anything, these conditions don't diminish love. If anything, provides a necessary framework for love to thrive in, if that makes any sense. Now, I'd like to touch on a subtopic which a lot of people end up falling into the trap of, which is the paradox of choice. And this is quite prevalent in our culture today, where a lot of individuals end up getting stuck in the cycle of the abundance of choice and feeling like if there's someone better out there. And ironically, more options doesn't necessarily bring you closer to happiness. If anything, it creates more doubt, hesitation, and unfulfillment. And the way through this paradox isn't by lowering your standards. If anything, you should have high standards, both for yourself and for the other person. But it's more so a mental shift from not trying to have the perfect one fall into your lap, but rather consciously making the decision to commit to that one person and building something meaningful with them. And this leads us to the more spiritual aspects of love. And if you're not a particularly spiritual person, you may be rolling your eyes over this. But if you ask anybody who has experienced falling in love, this is what they will try to, but maybe fail to describe, as it's quite hard to put into words. Even looking at it from a biological perspective, when we get close to someone, our oxytocin levels rise and our stress levels go down, and we become a lot more open and trusting with the other person. But back to the spiritual side of things, as emotional states such as love, peace, joy, and gratitude raise our vibrations, whereas emotional states such as fear, pride, and shame tend to lower our vibrations. But when you decide to consciously elevate your frequency, you're now able to give and receive love. And this leads us to another certain shift of our perspective regarding love, What if we viewed love as a skill that we can develop, rather than a predetermined feeling? Since a lot of us, like I mentioned at the start of the video, think of love as a spontaneous spark, this feeling that we should get when we meet the right person. But if love is a skill, it's an art that we can practice day in, day out, rather than something which we're passively waiting to discover, if that makes any sense. And it first begins with self-awareness, understanding the narratives that are playing in our minds, and the compromises that we unconsciously make. And in this section of the video, I'm going to refer to a philosopher called Erich Fromm, who wrote this interesting book called The Art of Loving. And he essentially broke love down into 4 basic components that we can all work on. So that is care, responsibility, respect, and knowledge. You can almost think of this as the core stats of love. XP points that you can level up, not only in romantic relationships, but also in other aspects of life. For the selfish reason that it just makes our lives and other people's lives a lot better. So let's start with care. The act of showing up. If you truly love someone or something, you're going to invest your time, attention, and your energy. And without this crucial piece of the puzzle, you end up viewing love as something which is passive. The next one is responsibility. Being able to respond to their needs and something that they truly care about. And this doesn't mean to lose yourself in them, but to be present so that they can be secure in your presence. Now the third one is respect. Understanding and appreciating that other person is an individual, not an extension or a possession or someone that you're trying to mold into something that they're not. And the final one is knowledge. You should know at least some things about them. Otherwise, you're just making the connection shallow. Because to love someone or something, you see them for who they really are. And like I mentioned earlier, these 4 components of love isn't just limited to romantic love. You can develop this in other aspects of your life. For instance, care can be nurtured in how you treat your personal health or your relationship with work. Responsibility can be developed when you commit to something bigger than yourself. Respect is practiced in every interaction, even with strangers. And knowledge can be expanded when you're curious about yourself, the world, and the people around you. So instead of thinking of love in the general sense, don't just think of fate or chemistry or acquiring or trying to acquiring love in more convenient ways, but rather taking opportunities of each interaction, each relationship, and each challenge as a way to develop that skill of love. I appreciate you watching the video. If you're still interested, you can check out one of the videos that I'll pop on screen right now.